So now we're going to talk about SYN and FIN, which are two flags that you set in packets, two of the TCP flags, and we're going to discuss scanning using them in IP fragments. So it's not a new scanning method, but a modification of the earlier methods. The TCP header is split into several packets so that the packet filters are not able to detect what the packets intend to do. But we talked about the newer security stuff, we'll reassemble it and then it's not an issue, right? So the newer gear, it's not an issue. The older stuff, it may still be. Even your SOHO, small office, home office, personal routers today will take care of these things. So the SYN and FIN flags are set, small IP fragments plus a port, and that's sent off to the target. And you get a reset back if the port is closed. So that's kind of how this works. So they just break it up into smaller pieces and it's reassembled on the other end at the target. So then hopefully the gear along the way doesn't check it and see if there's anything in it that's fragmented so that nothing, it'll just allow it to go through. But if it catches that you're doing a SYN-FIN scan, then it'll just filter it out, right? So now we're going to talk about banner grabbing, a very important concept. In fact, this is how vulnerability scanners work. So how do vulnerability scanners work? They grab the banner and then they look it up in the database of information that they have of known vulnerabilities to that day. That's why whenever you use a vulnerability scanner, you need to make sure that it's updated before you fire it off. If you just have one running constantly on your network, then you need to make sure that it's updated often. These things are constantly being updated. So banner grabbing or operating system fingerprinting is the method to streamline the operating system running on a remote target system. There are two types of banner grabbing, active and passive. So identifying the OS on the target host allows an attacker to figure out the vulnerabilities of the system that the system possesses and the exploits that might work on a system to further carry out additional attacks. So banner grabbing, this is what it's used for, but technically a vulnerability scanner will just go and flag the vulnerabilities. They typically don't go out and hunt exploits that are able to be fired at those vulnerabilities. And another thing is just because you have a vulnerability does not mean that it's exploitable. Not all of them will be. It depends on a lot of things. So we have active banner grabbing and passive banner grabbing. So active banner grabbing is specially crafted packets are sent to the remote OS and responses are noted. The responses are then compared with a database to determine the operating system. Responses from different OSs vary due to differences in TCP IP stack implementation. So passive banner grabbing is banner grabbing from error messages. Error messages provide information such as type of server, type of OS, and SSL tool used by the target or remote system. So sniffing the network traffic. Capturing and analyzing packets from the target enables attackers to determine the OS used by the remote system. So you're just going to dig in the wire and see what kind of telltale indicators you can grab that the system's producing. Like if you're monitoring an active FTP session, you may see when they try to connect, they'll say, hello, this is FTP server WF get version 27.2. And you can sniff that off the wire. You can sniff that off the active connection to the machine. So that's kind of what we're discussing here. And then banner grabbing from page extensions, looking for an extension in the URL that exists to determine the application version. So a docx, for example, it's one of these Windows versions, and then with a little bit more information, you can kind of narrow it down. So for example, a .aspx is an IIS server and on a Windows platform, but you need to be more specific than that for vulnerability lookups, right? So this is a kind of a revised definition. The classic definition of banner grabbing is to connect. So your vulnerability scanner will go and connect to something and then it'll get the message that's returned. So you can say SSH to host name, whatever. And then if it answers, it'll say, hello, I'm FTP or SSH server version 762 on 762.5.7 and give me your username and your password. So that's what, or it'll just prompt you for the username. So that's typically what banner grabbing is in most cases. They're kind of expanding on the definition a little bit here. This is kind of a crossover definition to operating system fingerprinting, which is really trying to identify the OS. Most people don't try to do that just from the banners, because I can have a Windows server with a Linux daemon on it through a VM or something like that that's answering on a specific port. So you may run into trouble trying to use this. This is not a real good definition in my opinion. Banner grabbing is when you connect to a port or service, or you hit a web server and you grab information from there trying to determine the exact version of the server. You actually make a connection versus passively doing it off the wire. You can sniff that information off the wire because whatever you see is being transmitted back to the client. So you still could do it passively. So the active passive part's okay. But what's really kind of in the gray area here is determining the OS from a banner. That's not going to give you, you might be able to determine if it's Windows or Linux, but you're not going to be able to determine the exact version of the OS or anything like that, where you can tell exactly which daemon you're messing with when you banner grab a port. So then what you do with that information is you'll take it and you'll go look it up on the CVE list and see what vulnerabilities are applicable to that particular version. And then you could go in and start trying to figure out, well, what exploits exist for this and can I fire them and do they work? So banner grabbing tools, you have IDserve and Netcraft. So Netcraft has two purposes now, scanning and banner grabbing, right? So banner grabbing tools continued. Netcat, very big program for lots of different things. The problem with Netcat is that it's considered a hacking tool. So if you try and download and install Netcat on a system with AV, it'll flag it as a virus. And then also Telnet. So Telnet, the client, not the server, you can telnet to a port and it'll give you this same banner information.